talk. Now, in this talk, we want to look at some work from Italy that shows the dangers of the mRNA vaccines and similar platforms. And this is particularly concerning because the mRNA technology is being pushed forward into other areas, but there's a completely fundamental problem with it. Now, I'm going to give you some information today from this website here, Make Europe Healthy Again. And we'll be looking at some evidence from Dr. Polykritis given on this very video here, which I can show you. Just before we do that, this is Make Europe Healthy Again. We want to make America healthy again. We want to make Europe healthy again. This is their website, shows some wonderfully European scenes. Their mission, independence, system level and environmental focus, collaboration across levels, cultural and heritage at the core, always good to hear, rooted in peace and human dignity, science-based, transparent and open. And I'm going to play you a bit of a video from this large conference presented to the European Union now. Let's listen to this first and then we'll comment.
So considering that the pharmaceutical industry plans to extend the use of the mRNA technology to several applications over the coming years, mainly because it saves time and money, we cannot overlook one of its most critical drawbacks. I'm talking about the immune response, where the body's defense system targets and destroys any cell producing the antigen encoded by the mRNA. The global scientific community, policymakers, and the general public must understand that according to a core principle of immunology, any cell producing a viral or foreign protein is inevitably recognized as a threat by the immune system and killed. Because of this mechanism, since the beginning of the vaccination campaigns, I'm trying to warn the scientific community about the necessity of conducting extensive biodistribution evaluations. Such evaluations in humans have been totally bypassed. However, clear histopathological evidence from biopsies and autopsies shows that the vaccine-derived genetic material can enter systemic circulation and spread without control throughout the body. This includes the brain and the heart, where it can trigger the immune system to attack the body's own tissues, leading to serious adverse effects like myocarditis, a condition I was the first to hypothesize and describe in scientific literature. Given that I'm speaking here today, I feel compelled to mention that, based on the findings of the Pfizer study number 185350, the Comirnaty assessment report by the European Medicines Agency, dated February 19, 2021, states on page 47, I quote, over 48 hours biodistribution from the injection site to most tissues occurred. Therefore, the EMA was aware that in rats, biodistribution beyond the injection site occurred involving most tissues. Despite these alarming safety signals, millions of people around Europe, including pregnant women and infants, have been inoculated with these experimental products. And this happened also thanks to the silence of the vast majority of the scientific community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there we have it. Distribution to the brain and the heart, and as we'll see, other tissues as well. This is systemically distributed. It goes all over the body. And I was particularly impressed there with that simple statement, the silence of the scientific community. Why aren't scientists bouncing up and down about this? Well, why is it left to certain scientists like Dr. Polykritis to bring this up, and other notable brave scientists and doctors around the world who have brought it up? I'm reminded of that Martin Luther King Jr. post or saying, and it is true, I have checked this out. It's something like, in the end, what we will remember is not the screams of our enemies. No, we expect that. We expect our enemies to have a go at us. No, what we'll remember is the silence of our friends. Why aren't these people that are supposed to be protecting us actually protecting us? Open question, I guess. So here's all the references as usual. Presentation to the European Parliament. October the 15th, 2025. Dr. Pangas Polykritis, we heard speaking. Make Europe Healthy Again. And he mentioned their systemic distribution to the heart and brain triggers the immune system. Now, what he also mentioned, and this is particularly poignant here, he mentioned that this was known. And this is evidence from this document here. Now, this document here, as we see, is from the European Medicines Agency, and it was published back in 2021. And I want to highlight something that it mentions specifically, and do check this out for yourself. I've put the link there for it. But this is mentioned specifically on page 47 of this report. Over 48 hours, distribution was mainly observed to the liver. This is distribution of the lipid nanoparticles containing the messenger RNA. The liver, essential organ, of course, the adrenal glands, just above the kidneys, the spleen, and the ovaries. Now, last time I checked, the ovaries were really quite useful for young women who want to reproduce. So I thought that's quite important. With maximum concentrations observed 8 to 48 hours post-dose. And of course, Dr. Polycretes has also mentioned their systemic distribution to the heart, causing pericarditis, which he was one of the first to give evidence for, as we'll show in a minute, and also to the brain. So what I want to do in this video is look at a little bit about the science. So we know that very basically what is happening is that the mRNA gets into a body cell. So like here's a body cell here. And the mRNA gets in and it produces this foreign protein. Because it's foreign spike protein, mRNA. And then the immune system comes and recognizes this foreign protein here. It recognizes this protein as being foreign, thinking this cell is virally infected, and then will recruit inflammatory cells to kill this body cell. Body cells will be killed by the cytotoxic cellular process. And of course, if that's a cell in the brain, or if that's a cell in the myocardium, that is, or in the ovaries, well, anywhere. I don't want any of my cells killed, thank you very much. But what I want to do now is give you a little bit of the science from one of Dr. Polycretes' papers that gives really conclusive evidence for this, based on basic science known about for a long, long time. So we've got the situation where the European Medicines Agency knew about this in 2021. The science is well known about before, and we've got a publication from 2022 that explains it very clearly, although of course it was known prior to that. This is very basic immunology. Why didn't our regulators, who can employ the best people in the country, pick this up? Anyway, let's look at that science now. So here we see a normal body cell. The first one we're going to look at is the normal situation. This is kind of normal biochemistry inside the cell. So we have endogenous proteins here. Proteins are constantly being recycled, and there's constant ongoing protein biochemistry inside cells. So you would expect that. And then these proteins here go to this proteasome where proteins are further processed in the cytosol, or the cytoplasm of the cell. But peptide fragments from this protein processing can be broken off. Now, what the body wants to do then is to check whether these protein fragments, these peptides, are part of the normal body, or whether they're part of, say, a cancer cell, or part of a cell that's infected by a virus. So what happens is these protein fragments connect up to something called the major histocompatibility complex. So don't worry about the big words, but so we see that these protein fragments here are connecting to this major histocompatibility complex, and that then presents, it's like the shop window, this presents this protein fragment onto the surface of the cell, where it can then be assessed by the immune system. And because this is part of the body's own protein, of course, the immune system won't do anything. And this mechanism occurs pretty well in all body cells, as far as I'm aware. Maybe not red blood cells that don't have a nucleus, but it occurs in all cells. So that's the kind of normal process. So that's what is happening all the time in pretty well all of the nucleated cells of our body. But here's a different situation. Here we have a lipid nanoparticle containing foreign mRNA. that's got into the cell. And what happens here is this translation of this, and it produces the spike protein. And this goes to something called this goes through what's called the endoplasmic reticulum. This is how stuff gets around inside cells. That then goes to the Golgi apparatus. And the Golgi apparatus are the exporting equipment. So when stuff is to be exported from the cells, it goes to the Golgi, and that puts it onto the surface membrane of the cell, as we see here. So here we see it on the surface of the cell. Now this is whole spike protein here, and that's detected by a B cell, or it could be a T helper cell, and that will generate an immune response. Now I assume this is what is supposed to happen. This is why you can get an immune response and antibody production to the spike protein. But something else happens as well. So if that's kind of what's supposed to happen, something else happens as well. And here it gets a bit sinister, really. So again, we have the lipid nanoparticle there containing the mRNA. That is translated there into spike protein, as we see. So far, so good, although it's not good at all, really. Anyway, that then goes to the proteasome, where there's processing. And again, we get protein fragments, peptide fragments. And again, of course, the body wants to check whether these peptide fragments are part of a normal cell, or whether it's part of a cancer cell, or whether it's indicative that a cell is infected by a virus or even an intracellular bacterium, potentially. So what happens is, just to check, it combines with a major histocompatibility complex here, and that's exported to the surface of the cell. But now, of course, what we have here is an abnormal protein. This is a foreign protein. It's not supposed to be there. So this CD8 lymphocyte, which is a killer cell, these are called cytotoxic lymphocytes, it recognizes that and it orders the destruction of the body cell. So this body cell, because it's expressing this foreign peptide fragment, will be destroyed by the immune system. That means any cell where this lipid nanoparticle gets to can potentially produce these abnormal fragments, and that can lead to cell death anywhere in the body. So that is the science, and it's been well known about for a long time, and it seems to have been ignored, which is disappointing. Now, those clips are from, those diagrams are from this paper here, which was that early Dr. Polycretus paper I talked about. This was actually published in 2022, although of course the work was much earlier than that. That report that we looked at from the European Medicines Agency, of course, that was actually February 2021, so this has been known about for a long time. So just to summarise the end part here on this, this is from that paper we've just looked at. There's the reference, of course. The difference with the traditional vaccines generally do not induce human cells to produce viral proteins, and thus human cells do not expose viral antigens derived from their proteosynthetic activity, in other words, to produce proteins. So normally a vaccine does not cause the cell to express this foreign protein, as we've just seen. Therefore, it doesn't trigger the autoimmune process and the autoimmune destruction of the cell. On the contrary, the genetic vaccines against COVID-19 induce human cells to produce spike protein. Now, the COVID vaccines is spike protein. This applies to any mRNA vaccine technology. Even if it's not a nasty protein like the spike protein, it's still a foreign protein. The fragments of that foreign protein will still be attached to the major histocompatibility complex. That will be presented at the shop window, the showcase of the cell. It will be presented on the outside membrane of the cell, and the cytotoxic lymphocytes will kill it. So what the foreign antigen that is produced doesn't really matter too much. It's still labelling that cell for destruction. This is the fundamental problem with this mRNA technology, which is why we should have a moratorium on vaccine mRNA technology until these problems are completely addressed and ironed out. Right. So it relies intrinsically on the autoimmune reaction. So this is how these things work, stimulating the immune system through this foreign protein. And this extended to all the cells that intake the genetic material. And as we've seen, they can be in the liver, they can be in the brain, they can be in the heart, they can be in the ovaries, just to mention a few. So, predicted by some brave scientists a long time ago, even admitted by the European agency's own supposed watchdog. I think if the European agency knew about it, we can assume that the Americans did, we can assume that the British did as well, given that they can read and this was in English. Why it wasn't acted on, of course, is an open question. So the science all adds up. This comes together to form a sort of a complete picture of the silence of our friends. But for now, on that sad note, thank you for watching.